Hi there, this is Chris from Money Hub, and this video looks at how to find the financial statements of charities within New Zealand. So if you haven't read our guide yet, which is linked down below, it's definitely worth looking at. We just take you through the charity sector in New Zealand and kind of answer that question of, well, I'm going to make a donation to a charity of my choice, but I want to know how much of that money that I donate is going to be used for the programs or for the actual intentions of the charity versus how much is going to be spent on fundraising to target new people or find new people to give money. That's always the concern, and of course there's media reports around this. So we're going to take you through two financial statements just to get like an understanding of this for two charities, and this way you'll be able to kind of understand exactly what you need to know. So just as a background, for charities, they all have very similar costs in terms of the structure of them. Nobody works for free, usually. And they also have, so full-time employees and general overhead, rent for their building, leases, all sorts of things there, sales and marketing costs. So the guide is very, very useful. Just have a review of it because it will help you out. But now let's go through and have a look at how to use the the charity's register. So the first thing you'll see is when you go to charities.gov.nz, this very helpful page here, and then what you can do is look at the charities register here, and then what you want to be looking for is search the register, and it's a really, really good website. It's always it's always reliable, and what you can do is just type in a name for a charity that you're interested in. So in this case, I've chosen Barnardo's, quite a well-known charity, and then you push enter, and then you can see that it's been registered since 2008 at the charity. That's its registration number, and then you can click here and you will find more information about it, including all their annual returns and financial statements. So what we click on here, you can just see their address, their website, some social media stuff. Sure, that's all good. You can read about what they do, which is really, really helpful. Just a summary. Of course, this is all on their website, but it's really just a nice sort of overview there. And then we look at the annual returns. So just as a background, we have no relationship with Barnardo's. It's just that this is an example that perhaps people are more familiar with. So we're going to look at it just to interpret the financials, and certainly not comment on them, but just let you know how to look at them. And of course the financials are the same in terms of the layout and the structure for any charity that you look at. So just as a background, you can see from the summary, which is under the annual returns, the amount of income that they received in the year ending 2021, and then how much they spent, and you can see that sort of going back to the start of the charity, which I believe was 2008, so there's their first year. So that's just quite useful to know, but we want to be looking at the financial statements just to work out where all the money goes. And I'll click on that there, and that will load up a statutory accounts summary, and what I'll do is just make that into a full thing. So my background is actually accounting, and I did used to work at EY, but that's not why I'm using this. So we audited a whole bunch of things, and but that's by the by. I'm just taking you through it so you can understand it. So here is the first page, which you can see all the revenue which has been received by Barnardo's. So you can see that, and so it always compares, sorry, just as a background, 2021, and then you can compare that to 2020. So you always have the current year, the left-hand side, and then the previous year or the previous period on the right-hand side. So here we can see that the Ministry of Education gave $17 million, because this is 000, or sorry, close to 18. We can see that another ministry gave 21 million, and then we can see that they fundraised for 7.2 million, and then they got some grants. Then they also got some fees from their trading, so like parent fees, and then some gains and losses and some investments, nothing too major there. And you can see there that they, total revenue would be 53 million, and then this is where they spent the money. So this is quite important because this is where your money goes. Had you made a donation Of course, all our taxes go towards these things here, which are great. But at the same time, this is likely where if you'd made a donation to Banados, this is where you would have ended up, like your money would have ended up. And then from this, we can interpret where the cost went. So employees, of course, was like the largest, about 38 million. And we'll go to this summary here under note 7, which will explain it further. You can see they had 4 million of administration costs. Of course, that's running all the branches. Occupancy costs will be likely to be like lease costs or rent costs for their building. Fundraising costs. So to bring in 7.3 million, they had to do a lot of outreach there, a lot of promotion. So they spent 1.7 million to do that. Service delivery, not entirely sure what that will be. Probably something to do with their programs. And then this is just financial accounting stuff, which you don't need to worry about too much. But really, what you do need to be looking at is the fundraising, plus also the largest expenses, just as to get a background of it there. But what you can see is that $1.7 million spent to raise 7.2. It's likely, if I just do a quick calculation, so that works out to be about 24%, of their spending is respent into fundraising. Sorry, 24% of the money raised has gone back into fundraising. So that's within kind of the range that you'd expect and that we've seen across the board. If we just go down here to note 7, it's just useful to understand these financial statements. So I'll go down to, there's a lot of words, don't be put off it. When I first started looking at these as a young auditor, I was like, wow, this is quite a lot. But actually, if you just break it down step by step, note by note, it's very easily understood. So you can see here that the bulk of their costs, of course, is going to be salaries and wages, because they have such a large network across New Zealand, which you can see on their website, and so that's where most of the money goes. So you can see here that you can also have a look at their, well, actually there's two things here. First of all, if we go back to the revenue and expense statement, you can see that they actually made a small profit, and charities often get into trouble if they make profits, but the argument is, well, if they don't make profits and retain some money, maybe next year they're gonna lose some funding or some situation will happen, so they need to have some money to cover the cost. They can't usually go off and get a loan from a bank like a business would, or issue shares. They can't do that. So this is why you will see sometimes, the year before they lost close to $1 million, and that's just because their costs were much higher than what their revenue was, because of course they're dealing with government departments who have their own budgets to work out, and fundraising. During COVID, that was the year, so less able to get money in perhaps. So there's a whole bunch of things. So it is just worth looking at the balance sheet, because this is something that's quite useful. So if I just go down to that there, you can see that for Banados, they have, and I'm not going to look at the notes here, but you can see that their charity owns about $7 million of cash. It's got, as you'd expect, some accounts receivable, which means people owe them money, and then they also have some retained earnings, which is all the profits that they've made over the years, which is in this case $20 million, 20.7, and that is really a situation of they've been prudent to be able to save that up, because they're obviously forward looking. So I do understand why they would have done that, but at the same time, I'm not here to critique any charity. It's just good to realize that some of them do sit on quite a lot of money, which they would argue is for their going concern or their stability in the future, because you never know when you'll lose grants or you need money suddenly urgently, and they have it. What we won't do is go through the cash flow statement, because this is just getting a little bit too specific, but really the notes are quite onerous, because there are quite strict reporting requirements. But it really is just good to see, right, there's a summary of where the money was spent. Is that something that I'm comfortable with? Yes or no? And then for further reading, we really suggest people go to the website. So in this case, you could go to the Bernardo's website, scroll around, see what they're up to, see their stats, and then just get a general feel for it and then make a decision. That's the same process for any charity. Like, it's always the best situation to go through and just, look at the financials, but really just look at what they're doing and, is that something that you really like? So we just go to another charity now for relevance. Let's go and look for, if I just go back to the charity details here. So I looked up ChildFund, and this is another large charity that operates within New Zealand, and it also sends a lot of money overseas. So if I go to the annual returns, you can see that their financial statements, they brought in around $12.6 million and they spent 11.7. But let's open these up, because this will be a very different situation to Bernardo's in terms of how they operate. But at the same time, what we can do is learn, how they spend their money and what that means. So I've opened that up, and we can see here ChildFund, and then if we just zoom in a bit, it's going to be the same situation in terms of all the financial statements, and we'll have a look here. So what it says is that their revenue, and this is all in millions, is that 5.2 million came from child sponsorships, so people donating their to sponsor a child, and then they got some government grants, and then other sort of regular giving, so people not sponsoring a child perhaps, but just sending in money or whatever, and then appeals, and then bequests, people leaving the money, and then other grants. So that is a very comprehensive list of where all the money came from. And then the next question is, well, where did they spend the money? So it says here it was spent all on distribution plus admin, and then they made a small profit, as you see here, and they did a small transfer to some relief reserve, but let's not worry too much about that. Let's go into note 3, because I think that's going to really reveal where all this sponsorship money and appeals money went to, and then you can see how they present that. So here you go. So from all the money that they raised, you can see that they had some costs with their administration, and then they also transferred a lot of it to their international organization, and then some to the Australia, and then they spent some on overseas projects directly. So that's really helpful. You can see that from the 12 or so million that they raised, yes, there was costs of running the program within New Zealand, but then they spent the majority of it, probably 75% of it, going to these projects. Now, what the question from there would be, okay, well, how does ChildFund International spend its money? So what you could do is just Google their financials, and I think that's the best thing there is just like ChildFund annual report. That's a good thing to search for, and you could just add annual report to any charity that you want to read about, and then you can see here you can download their annual report, and then once again go down to see it's got very useful information, and then this is coming from the international side of things, as this is everyone that they reached, and then you can see, right, let's have a look at the total money that was raised and spent. So some of this that we assume has come from New Zealand in terms of the contributions amount, and then what they've done is they've gone through here from their $233 million. This will be in US, I'd imagine. They've spent 46 million on education stuff. Health things have got 32 million, and then it's gone right through to early childhood development and like emergency relief and all sorts of things, micro enterprise. So you can see there that from the 223 million raised, they've spent 170 million, which is a fair percentage. And then you can see that they've spent 27 million on fundraising, which sounds like a huge amount when you look at it. But if you look at the total revenue being 223, and fundraising coming in, to probably driving sponsorships and contributions, then that's what they've spent to generate that. And that all goes back to what's in our guide about the going concern and just making sure that the charity is sustainable. So that's really it. And then you can see that they may have some gains. Last year they had some losses, and then really they just have the net assets at the end of the year, which is what they need to keep going without the worries of having to constantly raise or constantly be reliant on everyone giving money, and if they don't, then they're in a financial issue. So it's a really good just to have a read of these reports, because while the websites look nice and they are very informative, it really is what people expect. The standards are very high, and what people expect to be in these annual statements, annual reports, it's a very high level. So it's a very high standard. So yeah, I just suggest reading through them, making sure you're comfortable, and then making the move to donate when you feel comfortable. If you don't feel comfortable with any charity that you look at, then don't. But it is, the charities register is such a useful thing to do. You can also look at the annual return summary, but in fairness, it doesn't actually tell you that much. It is useful if I just download that one. So there's the annual return. It's just a government statutory requirement that they have to submit these if they're a charity. It takes you through who the officers are. It's kind of a summary of what's already on the website, on the listing. But then you can see their financials here, and you're not going to get a huge breakdown. You're just going to get what the revenue was and what the expenses were. So that's why it really is good just to dive into those details and go into these financial statements. You'll see them, year after year. And if you have any questions about it, then you'll always have information. You can contact them, phone numbers and everything like that. So really what we've said in our guide to make it crystal clear is that it's really useful to focus on what percentage of fundraising expenses a charity does as a percentage of their total revenue. Just because if a charity had $12 million of fundraising costs, but it only raised $15 million, then it would only really be able to spend $3 million on its programs, but then there may be some wages and salaries in that as well. So that's probably not the most efficient charity, but this is certainly not a video to comment on that. It's just really sort of making an understanding. So I've linked below to the charities register, so you can search for any charity that you want and find information about them. And then if you have any questions, just list them below. But you can also just say, the charity name plus the words annual report. That way you'll get an understanding of, what the charity is doing. Read through its website, see how it wants to be donated to. So you can see, for example, Bernardo's, you can just click on that to donate, and it'll probably take you through. You can do one-off, this is quite normal, or monthly. And it just really talks about, what that means, and then you'll start getting reports, and you'll start getting a whole bunch of emails just to keep you informed. This is not specific to Bernardo's, this is just charities in general. So yeah, this is it is heavily regulated in New Zealand. It's not a situation of people fronting charities which aren't actually charities. Of course you do get some of that, but always look for the information on the charities register, because that's where everything that's legitimate is held, and it's a very good starting point just to get an understanding of what charities are available and what exists. So that's it from me. If you do have any questions, do list them below. As I said, we're constantly updating our core charities guide just to give people more understanding, and hopefully you'll have the confidence now to click onto the charities register, have a look at what annual reports are available, and interpret them just looking at the numbers and then understanding them, and just seeing what percentage of where the money goes. By doing that, you'll have full confidence, and the statements are all audited for larger charities, so you've got confidence in the fact that what they've said is true. Some of the smaller charities, of course, don't need to be audited, but it really just depends on what you're looking for. Anything a major or significant, i.e. that's fundraising like on the street or like door to door or through media and stuff, that will usually be audited. Usually, not in every case, but yes, worth knowing. Thanks so much, and do let us know if you have any questions. Thanks.